Now, the part of the puzzle that is not solved for me is whoever he sent that to in the government, how it got from that person to Candace Owens. I don't know the answer to that question. I find it very disturbing, to put it mildly.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Nissim Black Show. I'm honored to be joined by Josh Hammer, an attorney, columnist, and the host of the Josh Hammer Show. He also happens to be a senior editor at Newsweek. Josh has become one of the clearest voices articulating what it means to stand for truth, for Israel, and for the moral foundations of Western civilization in an age of moral confusion. We will be diving into some of the biggest questions today. Obviously, a lot surrounding him, such as Candace Owens, Turning Point USA, Israel, America, and what it really means to stand for God's truth when the world is turning upside down. And in case you are one of the very few conservatives that have not been reading his brand new book, make sure you go and pick up a copy of Israel and Civilization, The Fate of the Jewish Nation and the Destiny of the West. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Nissim Black Show. You really think, if you were to put yourself in their shoes, that you'd be worried about who the politician, what side they're on? It just does not work that way. I'm Nissim Black, Israeli-American Black Hasidic Jewish rapper turned podcaster. This is the Nissim Black Show, where prophecy meets politics, faith collides with culture, and we search for truth in a world on fire. Josh, thank you so much for joining me today on the show. I know you are very, very busy because you have been probably everywhere, at least everywhere I look up, I see you. So I know you're making your rounds. So I appreciate you coming on the show.
Nissim Black, as they say in American radio, longtime fan, first-time caller. It's great to join you. Thank you so much for having me.
Likewise, you're amazing. You're amazing. So listen, let's just jump into it. The first thing I wanted to ask you is about loyalty and identity. And the reason why I want to ask you this is because, America first is a big thing right now, right? And then the way that people are seeing it right now, that if you're Jewish, especially if you're Jewish and you either have dual citizenship or you have, whatever type of allegiance that you may have to Israel, the problem is right now that it has to be, by a lot of these people, either Israel first or Israel or America first, right? It can't be that you have some type of loyalty to both of them. It has to be that you have to choose right now because of all the anti-Semitism, everything that's brewing, unfortunately, so much on the right, especially amongst young people. But I want to know, how do we put a marriage between the two? Because, to some degree, they're probably right. But on the other degree, I don't think people understand, especially from a Jewish perspective, of what the state of Israel means to a Jewish person. So I'd love for you to take a stab at that one.
Sure. So a lot to unpack there. Look, the land of Israel, the capital L, land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael, as we would say in the Hebrew, is inextricable from the Jewish religion. We can have the theological debate about the contemporary eschatological significance of the modern post-1948 state. Certainly, there are many folks who agree to disagree. There are some of our Haredi friends who take a certain stance. There are some of our Dati Leomi, our religious Zionist friends, who take a very different stance when it comes to the implications there. But when it comes to the land itself, the actual land between the river and the sea, as the Hamasniks like to say, you can't separate that from Judaism. In fact, anyone who is really looking at the 5 books of Moses, at the Torah, from Genesis through Deuteronomy, large swaths of this story are about a certain people getting to a certain land. Deuteronomy literally ends when Moses dies. He is standing there on the other side of the River Jordan, about to enter the land, because they have arrived. They are finally ready to enter. And just this past week in Parsha Lech Lecha, I mean, this is the beginning of God's promise of the land. So the land is inextricable to Judaism, and the reason for that, Nissim, is because Judaism is best understood not necessarily as a faith in the Western sense of the term. It's fine. I mean, I don't object to calling it a faith, but it's really a nationhood. It is really a nationhood. A religion, I think, would be fine. But there is a land that is part of the religion, that is part of the nationhood, that is frankly part of Torah, which is the very beating heart, the very essence of what it means to be Jewish itself. as an American Jew, I find that completely reconcilable with being an American patriot, which I am, with being a former federal U.S. Court of Appeals law clerk who put his hand, swore my oath to the Constitution, which I do. As being someone who has written law review articles, spoken at the top law schools, I find all of this completely reconcilable because I also believe in the nation state, and I believe in strong, independent nation states, and we're very fortunate, as the case may be, that the American interest and the state of Israel's interest when it comes to most foreign policy issues very neatly aligned. I mean, when America thinks about its strategic position in the Middle East and what it is seeking to accomplish, one of the various things that it is seeking to accomplish is to see its various foreign terrorist organizations, as defined by the U.S. State Department, be undermined and subdued in that part of the world. We're talking here about Hamas, Hezbollah, Kataib, Hezbollah. There's a whole list at the U.S. State Department's website. Well, these are the various foes, the Houthi rebels, I didn't even name them. These are the various foes that Israel is at war with, for better or for worse, but at war with on a literal daily basis there. And there are always going to be times where the direct national interest does not mirror. Frankly, America's national interest is not going to be the same as Canada's national interest on every single issue there. And on those issues, as an American, I am very happy to criticize Israel when need be. I'll give you a very concrete example, actually. As an American, my number one geopolitical concern is with China, is with the Chinese Communist Party, which is America's great power in this 21st century. Israel was in talks for a long time with having Chinese contractors construct the port of Haifa. That makes a lot of sense for Israel to try and play the great powers off of each other. Israel's a very small country. I don't blame them in the slightest. As an American, I don't like it. I'm not happy about that. I would prefer that America's number one ally not have a major port with Chinese contractors constructing it for all sorts of reasons there. So I'm perfectly happy to draw distinctions when need be. I'm very fortunate that I don't necessarily have to do so. There's an old line, Nissim, from Alan Dershowitz, who famously said that he would get asked many times over the years, "Oh, Alan, if the United States and Israel go to war, whose side would you choose?" Right? This is kind of one of these anti-Semitic gotcha cards. And the response that Alan Dershowitz told me that he would always say to these bad faith interlocutors was he would say, "The beauty of being an American Jew is that I simply do not have to choose, because we're on the same side. We are on the same side of team civilization. We're fighting the same barbaric enemies, the same Islamist enemies. The barbarians are at the gates. Israel's the canary in the coal mine. The United States is somewhere there behind to shore up all of the remains after Israel gets the first crack at the nonsense."
Listen, I'm sorry to stop the show for a second. I just want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Market Ding. Look, in today's world, if people can't find you online, then you don't exist. That's where Market Ding comes in. They're a digital marketing and SEO company that used to dominate healthcare, but now they dominate just about everything. Whether you're running a business or a brand or even a podcast like mine, Market Ding knows how to get you found fast. So don't just show up online, grow online. So visit marketding.com today and watch your growth online explode. Okay, back to the show. And that's amazing because what's interesting about it is I think that people are living in a world of delusion. Right? They're delusional about the fact that, these are Israel's getting us in all these wars and all this, as if these countries like America, right? Like they would totally be fine within America if only Israel wasn't in the way. And I think that is a part of the delusion that people are actually living under, that Israel's actually fighting this war and these wars on the behalf of Western civilization. It's just so clear. I mean, they are chanting death to America as well. And I understand why people are not getting it, or maybe they're overseeing it. I really need help trying to understand what people are seeing.
There's a few things going on here. So from an American perspective, there are a few things, especially when it comes to the younger right. I prefer to focus on the right because the left has just a million problems that are just not necessarily my own responsibility, my own kind of hen house to police over. So when it comes to a lot of this younger right-wing skepticism of U.S.-Israel relations, when it comes to a lot of these talking points that Israel is kind of dragging America into war. Okay, so there are a few things I think to bear in mind here. One, and by the way, before I continue, I do think that it is worth emphasizing that the younger MAGA right is more mixed than their parents' generation when it comes
Right.
to this issue. To be clear, it's not a lost cause. So just to give you one very concrete example,
Okay.
I debated the horrific libertarian so-called comedian Dave Smith at Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA conference in Tampa, Florida in July.
Yeah.
And the Turning Point team did a push poll of all the 4,000 young student activist attendees there, and 73% of them still self-identified as pro-Israel. So, I mean, look, maybe the number would have been 90% 10 years ago, but it's still not terrible. So it's not a lost cause, but it is seemingly on the margins, trending in a not healthy way, and that is somewhat different, I might add, than the nationalist populist movements across Europe and across much of the Western world. I mean, I think about Jair Bolsonaro when he was the leader of Brazil a few years ago, avowedly hardcore pro-Israel all throughout Europe. These European right-wing parties, typically very pro-Israel as well. So there is something slightly different going on when it comes to younger MAGA in particular. And I'll tell you, Nissim, what those things are that come to my mind. One is that I think that a lot of these younger millennial and then Gen Z MAGA supporters, Trump supporters, and so forth, there came of political age in the fallout of America's generally failed involvement on the world stage when it comes to things like Iraq and Afghanistan. And it has been all too easy for a lot of bad faith actors. I mentioned Dave Smith, he's one of them, but there are any number of others, Candace Owens. What they love to do is they all love to say that the reason that America got dragged into these conflicts is because of Israel. It's garbage. Right. It is a totally specious talking point, as I've told Dave Smith in both of our debates. Look at Ariel Sharon, who was the actual leader of the Israeli right in 2002 in the run-up to the Iraq invasion. He literally told George W. Bush, Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell, anyone who would listen, he said, don't do this. You're going to destabilize the region. You're going to just let Iran go in there and seize power, and he was exactly right. So
I've never heard that said. Wow.
Yeah, no, it's a garbage talking point, but they've been pretty successful at getting that out there, and I still see that messaging come from the Tucker Carlsons of the world, from a lot of these bad faith actors on the so-called right. So that is one. Another thing that comes to mind is this is a problem in a lot of diaspora Jewry, but I think the problem is particularly pronounced in the United States. There is a long time cultural and political left-wing slant to American Jewry, even more so than most other diaspora communities, probably Australia, Canada, the UK, many of which have historically left the center bent. America is historically pretty lopsided. Now, the good news is that's changing. That's changing as the Democratic Party becomes an anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist monstrosity, and as religious, traditional Orthodox Jews in the U.S. have much bigger families, and a lot of the non-Orthodox Jews, tragically, are actually intermarrying. So the demographics and the politics are starting to change a little bit, but as of today, that still is the trend. So I think a lot of younger MAGA will sometimes fall into this trap of watching these influencers talk about how, XYZ left-wing Jew was responsible for the evils of feminism, pornography, all this various stuff there. And then they'll also see that Jews vote for Democrats on these presidential elections by something like a 70-30 margin. They ask, well, what am I benefiting from this there? I mean, if they're not going to vote for us there. So that's at least part of it as well. But here is the biggest reason. I think the biggest reason for the rise of this rot, and let's call it what it is, it is absolutely a rot, is I can go back at least as far as the 2016 presidential election with the Russiagate hoax, which was this lie that Donald Trump was a Vladimir Putin puppet, a Manchurian candidate, that then launched the Mueller probe to swallow up 2+ years of the Trump presidency. From Russiagate to the COVID-19 pandemic, where they said that if you were a religious Jew, you couldn't go to shul for a minyan in Brooklyn, but if you were a Black Lives Matter protester, you could go for a public health dispensation. Then there was the 2020 election with all the shenanigans with the Hunter Biden laptop.
You go to clubs also too. You could go to a adult club also. The whole thing didn't make sense. It was just ridiculous.
Right, and then there was Gavin Newsom dining at some fine restaurant in San Francisco in violation of his own protocol. So there was all of that, and then there was the 2020 election itself, which was, for some people, it looked very shady. I was certainly critical of some of the things that happened around that time. The Hunter Biden laptop, the coordination between the big tech platforms and the deep state. Then the Biden administration prosecuting Donald Trump, the first time that's ever happened in American history. Democrats literally hiding a declining mental patient from the Oval Office. So, okay, the point here is this. The point is that a lot has happened in about a decade's time to severely cause the American people to lose trust in authorities, to lose trust in elites, to lose trust in accepted narratives. And traditionally, Nissim, putting on my Jewish cap and thinking about our people's thousands of years of history, there is historically one group of people from society to society that tends to disproportionately be wronged and harmed and blamed. When the you-know-what really hits the fan, when people start to just question everything and lose trust, and that, unfortunately, is the Jewish people.
It's crazy. I mean, I remember feeling at some point, there was a letter, I think it came out from Rabbi Lapiansky, who was the Rosh Hashiva, who's the head of the religious institution, the learning institution in Washington, D.C. He actually wrote an interesting letter. This was during, I would think it was leading up to the 2020 election. But what he wrote originally in this letter, if I could just summarize it, was basically saying that, speaking to the Jewish community, saying, like, we shouldn't get so gun-ho on a side, because we don't really have a side, even though we have a side, but we don't have a side. Now, he's obviously conservative in every way and very clear. However, what he was saying is that, historically, we've had problems with both parties. He says, and when push comes to shove, if it's in their best interests, both sides will turn against us. And I remember seeing that like, never. I mean, come on, we're so strong on the right. It's not going to happen. And immediately as this, things started happening, with Candace and then with Tucker and then with all the, when it started to hit the fan, I start going like, whoa, maybe he wasn't off. At first, because I was like, so many of Jews who were on the left, they felt that instantly. As soon as this war took off and everything started happening, they felt instantly, alienated from their political party, right? And we were saying, oh, yeah, see, this is what happens. This is when and then all of a sudden it started to shift on the right also. So I think seeing that for me makes me feel to some degree uncomfortable. And this leads me actually into my next thing, which was, JD, 2028, possibly running. The assumption is that he obviously would be the front runner for the Republican Party. My nervousness with it is I don't feel the same sense of loyalty for numerous reasons, right? One thing you could point out is the relationship between him and Tucker. Tucker's son works for JD. I don't like the comments in the way that he's spoken around about Israel in some of the public things that he said. It doesn't seem like he has the same type of allegiance, or I wouldn't say allegiance, or the same type of feelings really of support the same way that Donald Trump had. And so my question to you is, I don't know if I'm just imagining this or if I have grounds to feel uncomfortable the way that I do about it. And I like JD. Ultimately, I do. It's not like I dislike the guy. I was pro, we could just be honest, what we all did. As Trump was picking his cabinet, we're running down everybody's list, who's for us, it just is what it is.
Yeah, so let me get to JD. I'm absolutely going to get to that, but let me just say this. It seems to me that what happened, Nissim, I was born in 1989 in suburban New York State. It seems to me in retrospect that I was born, let's call it the tail end of the golden age of post World War II American Jewish life. Which was these decades after the Holocaust, where I think that the United States and much of Western society was steeped in guilt from the Holocaust. This is kind of the age of egalitarianism and pluralism and so forth there. But it does seem to be the case on the one hand that the further you get removed from the Holocaust. It's a pretty obvious point. It's not exactly a novel insight. There are fewer survivors around. Those stories are not passed down from generation to generation quite as often. It's very similar, Nissim, to the concept that we have in Orthodox Judaism, that every generation that is further removed from revelation at Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, is not quite as holy or as tuned in to the Shekhinah, the divine spirit, as the generation that preceded it. Well, by way of very crude analogy, there's probably something to be said for that when it comes to, just from a sheer time perspective, after the Holocaust, when it comes to American society. On the other hand, I would caution American Jews from truly doomspilling either. Look, I'm a lawyer by background, okay? I studied the Constitution. I've written law review articles on the Constitution. I still lecture about the Constitution to this day. America's constitutional order is really, really, really strong. Our courts are really, really, really strong. This administration, this particular administration, the Trump administration, is really, really, really strong when it comes to protecting Jews here in the United States, when it comes to suing the crap these anti-Semitic demons in higher education, when it comes to launching civil rights lawsuits, when it comes to the various other lawsuits, when it comes to defunding. This is the most pro-Jewish administration of my lifetime, which makes for something of an ironic juxtaposition, frankly, to the broader conversation that is now playing out on social media, on the internet, and so forth, when it comes to a lot of these, Fuentes, anti-Semites, the neo-Nazis, Tucker, Candace, all that stuff. So let me just say that. But that does then take us to the Vice President, J.D. Vance. So I've known J.D. Vance for some time now. I've known him for probably 7 years, something along those lines. We first started following each other on social media when we just had 20, 30,000 followers on Twitter and whatnot there. I happen to personally like J.D. Vance a lot. I've literally drank beers with the guy. I find him very relatable. I happen to just genuinely like the guy. I think he's very, very smart as well. I think he's done the reading, so to speak, there. And even when it comes to this particular issue, I recall, Nissim, he gave a wonderful, wonderful speech in a very hostile setting, actually, in the Quincy Institute, which is basically a pro-Iranian regime hub in Washington, D.C. He went in there into the lion's den. This was May 2024, about 2 months before he was tapped to be Trump's running mate, and gave an amazing speech defending the U.S.-Israel relationship robustly on nationalist, realist, dare I say, MAGA, America. I mean, all the grounds that I would have defended it on, or that Donald Trump would have defended it on. I think the relevant question that a lot of folks are asking is how much, if anything, but potentially how much has changed since the J.D. Vance that gave that amazing speech at the Quincy Institute in May 2024 and today. And you mentioned his response to this obviously anti-Semitic interlocutor at the recent Turning Point USA event in Oxford, Mississippi. Not great. Now, I mean, also, as someone who has done that live Q&A myself, you're not always going to give your best answer, so I'm not going to, knock the guy too hard there. The big problem to me, as you correctly identify, is Tucker Carlson, who has become the most dangerous anti-Semite in the history of the United States, and someone who is not just trying to kick the Jews out of the American right, which he obviously is, along with many of his fellow travelers, but he also is trying to burn down the MAGA coalition. So even if it's not just about the Jews, I genuinely hope, indeed, I pray, that the vice president and all of Tucker's other erstwhile one-time friends, I hope they come to their senses and see this guy for what he is, because this is not the Tucker Carlson of the COVID-19 Black Lives Matter era monologues on Fox News. Those were must-watch monologues. I watch them every single night. This guy is different. He's changed a lot, and this is a massive, massive problem. And I genuinely hope that the vice president does the right thing, ideally sooner rather than later, given what's currently happening out there when it comes to this particular issue. Because unless and until he nips that particular issue in the bud, this is going to haunt him and haunt him and haunt him. If he does nip it in the bud, though, Nissim, that would go a tremendous way, I think, towards reassuring many of us that the J.D. Vance who gave that very eloquent speech at the Quincy Institute in May 2024, that is still who he is.
I don't have to tell you that in our fast-paced lives, we rarely stop to just breathe, to reconnect ourselves with Hashem and with our purpose. And that's why I'm really excited to tell you about Kavana, an incredible new app that helps bring mindfulness and Jewish spirituality into everyday life. It's filled with guided meditations, music, sleep stories, quick 1-minute pauses, and daily inspiration, all designed to help you live with more Kavana, with more intention, more presence, and more meaning. And right here on the Kavana app, I'll be releasing a brand new guided Heat Bodhidut series, a powerful journey into personal prayer and connection with the Creator. So go download the Kavana app today, sign up, and join me for the course. That's amazing. Good question. And you actually landed in a place that I wanted to go. Specifically with Tucker, because the relationship, there's a lot of TPUSA stuff I want to talk to you about, so hopefully we get to it all. But specifically with Tucker and his involvement in TPUSA, I mean, even the fact already that, I understood that I don't understand him and Charlie's relationship. Charlie and Tucker were, as far apart, almost as him and Nick Fuentes almost. As I always say that, they say the furthest distance in the world is in between the head and the heart, and I say they were even much further than that in terms of the way that I view those individuals. So the fact that now Tucker, allegedly there was $1 million exchange or whatever the case is that he gave or donated or from his donors or whatever to TPUSA, which I don't think that that's anything. I know people are bringing that up. That's not really a lot of money. The question that I have is that he is becoming, it's looking as if he's becoming more front and center in TPUSA, and that's what people are worried about. Like, we don't want the narrative to actually switch or to be changed because of Tucker's involvement, and unfortunately, it looks like he's being involved a little bit too much and too many things he's speaking at. I mean, for my comfort, I'm not saying I don't know. I don't get to decide what's too much, obviously, but he spoke also at the eulogy for Charlie also, and that also didn't go well. And it's one of those things where I'm nervous about that relationship as well, because it doesn't look like Charlie's message is being preserved.
You're right to be concerned about that. So, Nissim, I was very close with Charlie. Charlie and I spoke virtually every day for the final year and a half of his life. I was in this WhatsApp chat that has been infamously now partially leaked by Candace Owens. And Charlie named this WhatsApp chat, by the way. He named the chat, in which there were probably 8 or 9 of us, give or take. He named it Saving Civilization because he was passionate about saving Western civilization, which he, like myself, we identified Western civilization as being the broader ecumenical biblical inheritance, as being the product of the original people of the book, the Jewish people, and then what a great 20th century pope once referred to as the great Gentile offshoot of the original people, Christendom. Right. And as a religious Jew myself and as a religious Christian himself, we shared a mutual passion for this there. So Charlie Kirk's Christianity, Nissim, his Christianity was the Christianity of the American founding. It was the Christianity of a man like John Adams, America's second president, who famously said that it is his contestation that no people has done more to civilize the masses than the Hebrews, because they introduced to the world the great concept of the one true God, thereby giving monotheism in an age of moral relativism and idolatry and paganism. I mean, Charlie Kirk's Christianity was the same Christianity of Abraham Lincoln, who famously referred to Americans as a, quote, almost chosen people, deliberately evoking this Tanakh, Torah, Old Testament phraseology and nomenclature. So Tucker Carlson's Christianity is a very, very, very long way from that. In fact, it is such a long way for that I actually, far be it from me as a Jew to accuse him of Christian heresy, but I've done it already, so I might as well do it again. He literally seems to me like a heretic. Like, the way that he talks about the Old Testament, a.k.a. the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, he talks about it as being full of murder and genocide and violence. And this is actually what Christian theology would refer to as a form of Marcionism, which is the which is the assertion that the God of the Old Testament for Christians is not the God of the New Testament. That's literally heretical on Christianity's own terms. So when Tucker goes out there and does this whole, I'm a Christian, I'm offended at Christian Zionists because it's not, I mean, dude, you're literally a heretic on your own purported religion's terms. So I mean, let's kind of just stipulate that out there. But Yes, Charlie and I disagree. I mean, he was a friend. We didn't agree on everything, obviously. I did not like that over the final year, give or take, of Charlie's final life, that Tucker continued to be platformed. And Charlie drew this bright line between Nick Fuentes, who was his lifelong adamant foe. He drew this bright line between Fuentes and Tucker. And in my judgment, that line was rapidly fading. It was rapidly fading towards the end of Charlie's tragically truncated life. If only he had lived another month and a half, he would have seen the line completely collapse, because Tucker literally had Fuentes on the interview, and it was a total puffball friendly interview that the whole world has now seen before their own eyes. So I'm not happy about the fact that Tucker Carlson was platformed and continues to be platformed by Turning Point USA. Turning Point USA thinks of itself as a big tent organization. I have spoken at numerous Turning Point events. Their next big conference this December is AmpFest in Phoenix, Arizona, their big annual conference. I was looking at the roster of speakers just the other day. It is worth noting that our mutual friend Ben Shapiro is scheduled to speak at AmpFest. There are plenty of other pro-Jewish speakers who are scheduled to speak there as well. My good friend Steve Deace, who is an evangelical but very pro-Jewish, pro-Israel. Other speakers as well. Brandon Tatum, who is phenomenal. So there were other speakers scheduled to speak there as well, in addition to Ben. So Turning Point is still trying to do this all sides thing. Again, the problem, I think, is that there are some folks in this broader tent, let's call it, that are questioning not just the MAGA credentials, but I would argue the very Americanism and very patriotism, frankly, the very humanity of other folks of this tent. That's what I see sometimes from folks like Tucker, Candace, etc., and that's a really, really, really problematic place to be. So, yeah, I don't like Tucker at all. I've been one of the loudest critics of him for the past year and a half, 2 years of anyone on the right. I think his direction is profoundly dangerous. It saddens me as a former friend of his, and I think that the sooner that the rest of the right here in America wakes up to the danger that he poses, the sooner the better.
The sooner the better, for sure. I heard it was alleged that Nick Fuentes was also supposed to speak. That is a rumor, right? That was a lie. It was a bald-faced lie. Tell me it was a rumor.
I have seen zero indication of that. To say that I would be flabbergasted, I think would be the understatement of the century. That's not going to happen. Literally no one caused Charlie Kirk and his now widow Erica more hell over the years than Nick Fuentes. I mean, this guy would literally show up to the conferences. He knew he wasn't invited. He knew he was banned from entering. He would do a counter conference across the street, calling Charlie Kirk a race traitor and all this disgusting stuff. No one tormented Charlie and Erica more than Nick Fuentes. So I find it's simply beggars belief. There's no way that they would ever platform him, God forbid, especially let alone a few months after Charlie's horrific death.
Right. So speaking of concerns, thank you so much for clarifying that for me. Speaking of concerns, I have concerns about Candace. She's been coming at you just completely out of pocket. I think it was very, very at this point, she can't surprise me. I think I tweeted out something along the lines, but you can't make this stuff up. And then never mind, she did make everything up. So, and the reason why I say that is because the lady has just become completely unhinged, right? But I guess my question is, here's a few of my concerns. I'm gonna just lay them out for you, and you can answer them however you want. You were in touch with Charlie maybe less than 24 hours before, unfortunately, that, as you said, his life was truncated. So the thing is with Candace, I'm worried about. So I've already expressed my concern about Tucker. The other thing is that how does she get the text messages from that group? I mean, that for me is a major concern. Another concern for me is nobody has openly said yet, shut up. Like, Candace, stop. Like, you know what I mean? And these, all those things together is what bothers me. And what bothers me is that then I start thinking like Candace. You know what I'm saying? Like, I start getting conspiratorial. Like, what is going on that nobody is quieting her? Not that I believe anything that she's saying is true, but I am a little concerned about who from inside gave her those messages to be able to display.
So you're asking the right questions. So here's what I can say. The first is a matter of public record. So Andrew Colvett, who was Charlie's longtime executive producer, I've known Andrew for many years. In fact, Andrew actually interviewed me before I first joined Newsweek in the first place. That's how I first got to know him. It was kind of a screening call. It's neither here nor there. I've known him for a very long time. Andrew has now been the main host of the Charlie Kirk show since Charlie was tragically assassinated. So Andrew publicly admitted that these screenshots came from him. Now Andrew's words were that he did not send them to Candace Owens. I think Candace Owens actually has said some very bad things about Andrew and also about Mikey McCoy, who is Charlie's chief of staff, the son of Charlie's pastor, Rob McCoy. So Andrew did not send them directly to Candace. Rather, what he says is he sent them to a couple of high-ranking folks in the government. I'm not sure if it's DOJ, FBI, White House, whatever it is. In those 24 to 36 hours after Charlie's death, where they didn't have the suspect yet. Apparently, they were hounding him for any and all leads, and that was the context in which those screenshots were sent. Now, I should say, Nissim, if I'm being very honest, I do find it troubling that my friend Andrew thought that those particular screenshots would potentially indicate a lead for the government in the first place, because these screenshots that he sent showed Charlie upset that he had just lost a $2 million a year donation from a major Jewish pro-Israel donor. So I do find it disturbing that this could somehow be a lead as to how Charlie killed, but what Andrew would say is they haven't found the guy yet. My best friend's been killed. I'm just going to turn over any and all information there. Now, the part of the puzzle that is not solved for me is whoever he sent that to in the government, how it got from that person to Candace Owens. I don't know the answer to that question. I find it very disturbing, to put it mildly, and I would very much like to know exactly how that happened. As far as why Turning Point as an organization has not said anything about the utterly insane crap that Candace is saying on a daily basis, I don't know the answer to that question. I personally wish that they would. I personally wish, I think it is time at this point. It has been almost 2 months since Charlie's assassination, and there are just horrific things being said, not just about me, but at this point about Andrew, about Mikey McCoy. I mean, Mikey is he's a young guy. Was he 23, 24 years old? Really nice guy. Again, the son of Charlie's spiritual mentor. Candace, by the way, came after Pastor Rob McCoy as well. I mean, the woman is, oh my God. The woman is
I just got a call today from I think maybe a mutual friend of ours, Matthew, I forget to say Matthew's last name anyway.
Farachi?
Yeah, Faraki. So I think they're actually bringing McCoy, which I'm looking forward to meeting, but I couldn't even believe it. It's like I said, she at this point is unhinged. She's going after everybody. She's going after his pastor. She's going after his best friend. She's going after all of his constituents, and nobody is saying anything about it. You understand? Like I am perplexed by this, that nobody's saying to be quiet. Like it's not like she's going to stop. She's obviously profiting.
So there's two views on this. The cynical view, Turning Point's critics would say they're doing this because they know that Candace, Fuentes, the Groypers, whatever, have support within the Turning Point USA membership, the student activists, the student chapter leaders. That's what these cynics would say. I think the other view, which is what Turning Point's leadership would say, and for what it's worth, I mean, I'll give them enough credit where I think that this is actually what they're doing, is I think that they would say that they're not saying or doing anything because they just think or hope that it will blow over, that Candace and these others crazies will move on to their next target. There's probably a little bit of truth to that. There's probably a little bit of not truth to that. I personally, if I were running the show at Turning Point USA, which I'm obviously not, I don't work for the organization at all, but if I hypothetically were working there, I would have pushed internally for some sort of definitive statement by now. And I think that is called for at this point, but it has not happened for XYZ reasons that people can debate.
Okay, so going back to the text messages, actually, my question is, how did you feel? I mean, you obviously saw them live, right? So you're in there, you saw them live. You saw what was in the rest of the thread. Obviously, you obviously shared from your end messages that you and Charlie had exchanged. So my question is for you, like, where do you think Charlie was coming from? I mean, there was no indication that he, you obviously also mentioned that, the last conversation you were having were talking points defending Israel, even after he had said what he said, which does indicate, like, I think even Andrew had said, and I forget who was on the show at the time, said that he was just venting. He was just letting off steam, and that was the way that he felt, which he had the right to feel that way. I also hold, like many others, that the donor also had the right to pull out if you bring in a person who I would consider probably one of the biggest anti-Semites this generation also. So That's my question. Hey, right now here in the land of Israel, our children are facing two battles. Not only the battle that has them running to the safety rooms, but also the war inside of the classroom. At Kol Koreh, they help children with dyslexia and other learning disabilities find their voice and their confidence. But today, unfortunately, they've already been turning away families, and these are families who desperately need their help. These kids, under the pressure of war, now face the possibility of losing the one place that helps them to learn and to grow and to believe in themselves, and we cannot let that happen. This is our chance to stand with Israel in a very real and tangible way to help keep these children learning, and even in the darkest times. So please go to kolkoreh.org right now and give whatever you can. Your support will go a long way, and it will help change a child's life for sure.
So this all happened right on the eve, on Erev Sukkot here, actually, right. In October here. So in Florida, where I live, I kid you not, it was 20 minutes from when I was about to turn my phone off to go race off to shul to bring in the Chag of Sukkot when I started seeing these screenshots posted on social media. And I immediately knew that the next 49 hours for the 2-day Yom Tov here in the United States, I knew that this is going to be kind of crazy. I didn't know exactly how crazy it would be. Someone told me at synagogue over those 2 days of being offline, Candace is saying some pretty crazy stuff about you. But yeah, that was quite an evening, that Wednesday evening in early October when I turned my phone back on after the Yom Tov to begin Chol Chamoed Sukkot. And I think I was up to like 3:30 a.m. that night just dealing with all of this garbage. Just utter, unhinged, and not just garbage, but a lot of threats. I mean, the problem, Nissim, is that these people have followers. These people really have followers. And Candace Owens can say utterly insane things like heavily imply, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Josh Hammer actually had foreknowledge of Charlie Kirk's assassination. She can say these ludicrous, insane, demonic things, and people just believe it because it's on the internet. Again, this is one of the downsides, to kind of circle back to our earlier conversation. This is one of the downsides of living in the kind of age that we do, that the people's ability to trust and believe narratives is so broken that they are just willing to believe essentially anything if someone who they have subjectively deemed has credibility, if that person has said it. So that was really quite crazy there. And it was awful. I mean, it was absolutely awful. But to get back to your actual question there, the day after I logged back on, I did decide to do something that I really did not want to do. There were a lot of folks who were playing the whole screenshot war. Oh, here's a screenshot of me and Charlie Kirk defending this position, that. I really did not want to get involved with that because it feels really icky. I mean, my friend's just been killed. I mean, I've never had a friend murdered before, let alone a friend murdered in this fashion, in this horrific, high-profile assassination before a global TV audience. The whole thing was it was horrifically saddening, horrifically disturbing. I was not about to do these screenshots, for goodness sake, there, but Candace Owens says that I was involved in the murder, so I felt I had to defend my name, if nothing else there. So yes, what happened was she posted screenshots of Charlie reacting to losing this $2 million a year donation from a major Jewish pro-Israel donor. By the way, the donor had every right to pull his money, and Charlie had every right to be upset about it. That's just the nature of running a nonprofit and having donors and donies. That's just how it works there. So yes, he was blowing off steam. He was totally joking about inviting Candace to the next Turning Point conference. He never in a million years was doing that. He had basically booted her out. She hadn't appeared at a conference in over a year, maybe a year and a half. I don't know the exact time duration, but it had been a hot minute. Let's call it. Let's say that. Right. And yes, this was 3:30 to 4 p.m. the afternoon, the day before he was killed. 2 hours later, at 6 p.m. Eastern time here in New York, D.C., Florida time, he organized a Zoom call for me, for Rabbi Pesach Walicki, who lives there near you in Jerusalem, and a few others, because he trusted us as to give him advice and counsel before he embarked on this nationwide campus tour to just talk through all the issues, because he was getting a ton of anti-Israel, anti-Semitic hostility in campuses. He wanted to know the best arguments from both a substantive and a messaging rhetorical perspective in order to best combat these terrible narratives, and he sought our counsel. He was very happy with what we said because he went out of his way, of his own accord. He said, "Thank you guys so much," with like 2 exclamation marks, whatever it was, for that Zoom call. He was very happy. And someone who was about to turn on Israel, Nissim, someone who was about to pull a Tucker, to pull a Candace, does not organize that Zoom call, does not organize that call to go through these talking points with me, Josh Hammer, or with Rabbi Pesach Walicki the night before embarking on these. It's just not something he would do. So the people that are saying that Charlie Kirk was about to ditch Israel or leave Israel, they're totally lying. He wrote this beautiful letter to Bibi Netanyahu earlier this year. I read it at the time. It was publicly divulged sometime after his death. I read it months ago. The letter begins, I'm paraphrasing, it's a very close paraphrase. He says, "As a Christian, one of my greatest joys in life is forming friendships with the Jewish people and standing with the state of Israel." And I know that, Nissim, personally, because I was one of the Jews that Charlie Kirk befriended. He was not about to turn on the Jews or the Jewish state.
It's cool. It's so crazy that people would even imagine that. Seeing as how Charlie lived, the way that the way he modeled his life, it's crazy to me. But you know what? I want to go all the way back to the first question, because I sort of had a different take, and my take was like this. And this is what I think the problem is with America right now: is the lack of religion, the lack of spirituality and being connected to it. So, when I started to think about, are you America first? You're not America first. And this is all connected, actually. Started to think that, listen, first, I'm God first, right? So I would hope that any person who professes to be a Christian is a Christian before they're an American, right? We have a major problem even in the black community, where black has become the new religion, right? So even if you can be, it doesn't matter what you are, whether you're a Christian, there's black Jews, there is black Muslims. And I have seen as a community, people struggle with wanting to keep black identity and be, black more than they wanted to actually be whatever their, respective faiths were. And I think that is a misnomer. I think that's something that's wrong. That I think the idea of America first cannot mean that America comes before God and what your religious beliefs are, right? So for me, as a Jew, I'm a Jew before I'm anything else. I'm a Jew before I'm black. I'm a Jew before, I'm an American even, right? And as you said, Israel being attached to that, it's also attached to the faith of Christians, right? Not just dispensationalists, right? As you mentioned, the Bible has mentioned Israel more than 85% of the time. It's talking the star character role of the Bible, which is the foundation even of Western civilization, is Israel, right? So this disconnect that I think that people are actually having is a disconnect of faith. I really think that that's what it is, where it seemed as if Charlie was not having that disconnect. He was very in tune with what Israel was and what it meant to him, even as a Christian. Am I correct about that?
I think that's exactly right. Charlie understood the role that God's chosen people and the contemporary state of Israel both play in the grand, let's call it teleological, cosmological, whatever you want to call it, in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, eschatological. Right. I mean, we could toss all these big words, but he understood the role that the Jewish people and the Jewish state play on the global stage. I was looking back on Charlie's social media feed the other day, and I noticed that it was November 2023, so a month, give or take, after the horrific Hamas pogrom of October 7th. He posted a photo of him at the Kotel there in Jerusalem with his hand on the wall, wearing the kippah. And the particular pasuk, the particular Bible verse that he quoted, was actually just from Parsha Lech Lecha, which we read in synagogue across the world this past week. And it's the very famous verse often quoted by our Christian Zionist friends. It's Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, where Hashem tells he's still Abram, not Avraham Avinu yet. He says, "I shall bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you." And that was the quote that Charlie put there on his social media feed. He understood all this. He understood that this is part of his Christian faith. So, for Tucker Carlson, who admitted to one of his guests in August that he just read the Old Testament, aka the Hebrew Bible, he just read for the first time last year. He literally said that. So for him to kind of parachute in here as some sort of amateur theologian and to tell someone like Charlie Kirk, who was, I can't even remember sometimes that he's tragically gone, but who was a devout, sincere, principled evangelical for his entire life, for Tucker to call that vantage point heresy and say that it is illegitimate is utterly and completely preposterous. And far be it from me to do to try and quote New Testament verses either. It's not really my game as an observant Jew, but there are any number of verses even in the New Testament that support this as well. As one of my good Christian friends often reminds many folks in the space, Romans 9 through 11 makes it very clear that there is a role to play for the chosen people abiding by the Mosaic law, by halacha, and so forth there. So I think good Christian theology, especially in the United States, again, the United States was founded and always existed with a very different type of Christianity than that which proliferated in the old world in Europe. The Christianity in Europe, especially during the 2 millennia of the Catholic Church, but even frankly after the Protestant Reformation to a large extent as well, that Christianity was oftentimes not hospitable to the Jewish people. On the contrary, it was oftentimes very genocidal. It was really, 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 really bad at times. It is a dark, dark, horrible history in many ways. It's gotten a lot better, thankfully, until it started to get bad again. But that's another conversation. But the point is that the Christianity in the United States was always different because it was founded by genuine Philo-Semites. Nissim, what's the quote on the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia? It's not Aristotle writing in his Nicomachean Ethics. It's not Cicero giving a speech on the floor of the Roman Senate. It's Leviticus, Sefer Vayikra, chapter 25, verse 10. Thou shalt proclaim liberty throughout the land and to all the inhabitants thereof. Leviticus. Does it get any more Hebraic, any more Hebrew Bible, Tanakh, Old Testament than Leviticus, for God's sake? It doesn't. It is the quintessential Old Testament book. So this is foundational to Western civilization. It is foundational to the United States. It is foundational to what it means to be an American. And frankly, I sometimes think that people like Candace and Tucker would actually learn a lot by just going to visit the Liberty Bell once again in good old Philadelphia.
They don't have to go to Israel for that. I know we're getting short on time. I wanted to ask you this about your years back, your time back at the Daily Wire. Were you there at the same time as Candace? Like, I don't know how far back you guys actually go.
I was not. We did not overlap. I've actually, Nissim, I don't even know if I've met Candace Owens in person. We've probably been in the same room at some point, a conference, a gala, whatever. We've probably been in the same room. I don't personally recall ever having an individual conversation with her. I've never really crossed paths directly, frankly.
So none of this is past the fact that so none of those insults that she's thrown your way is coming from anything where there was something personal. There was nothing there before. I mean, she's literally, as I said, making it up as she goes. I mean, the Hampton, the Bill Ackman thing, the whole everything. Right. It is really seeming like that there's a deterioration or something going on with her. I don't know. She's self-destructing at this point. I feel very, very bad for her, but I feel even more bad for Erica that she's going through all of this right now. And I wish that somehow, some way that Candace and all the other ones, I mean, the things that are going on, because she's become the ringleader really for all of this. And it's just unfortunate. I feel bad for Erica, and I feel bad for those who were very close to Charlie, unfortunately.
Well, I'll tell you why I think that I have become personally such a target for Candace, for Nick Fuentes, for a lot of these folks.
You're Jewish, Josh. That's why.
So it's because I'm Jewish. I wrote a book. I wrote a book on the Jews. I wear a kippah, but also because I was friends with Charlie. And because what they're trying to do, Nissim, is they're trying to hijack Charlie's legacy, and they're trying to argue that he was on the cusp of making this wild 180-degree turn, that Turning Point USA, it has to follow the direction that he was wink, wink, nudge, nudge going, as opposed to the direction where there are countless hours of him producing content on the internet, defending the Jewish people, defending Israel, et cetera, et cetera. They're trying to steer the direction of Turning Point USA and thereby steer the direction of the broader conservative movement. And someone like me, I'm very problematic to that narrative because I am a proud Jew and I was a friend and confidant of Charlie Kirk's. So therefore, the narrative has to be posthumously rewritten so as to say that Josh Hammer was a traitor, he betrayed Charlie Kirk, a foreign agent. I mean, all these crazy things, all of which are just patently insane, demonic garbage. But that's what's happening here, I think. That is why they're doing this about me. And they're not going to win. They're not going to win because the truth in this situation, Nissim, always prevails.
Yeah, and I think arrogance destruction always follows it. And as the ego gets puffed up, yeah, you're bound to see people fall. And unfortunately, it just has to end this way. So listen, before I get out, I want to ask you just a little bit more about just one last question, really, about what we do for the future, what we see this. I mean, even as religious Jews, as Jews who are on the right, and seeing what's going on with the party. Is there anything, Charlie in his letter to Bibi was very much so. It was very much so offering advice and strategies on how to combat the anti-Semitism of what was going on. Is there any strategy or advice that we should be taking in order to, sort of shift and change the narrative that's now happening right now on the right amongst others? The left, you said not to write them off. I'm sorry. It's very hard for me not to. However, at least within the MAGA movement and within, the conservative world, is there anything that we could do or that maybe Charlie had foreseen that will be able to help basically smooth things back out and, basically see Israel in a better light than what it is?
Well, to be clear, I do think the left can be written off. I was only saying earlier that I am of the right, not the left, and I can't realize there's only so much I can do to police the henhouse that is not my own. Right? I oftentimes try to focus on how to better steer the American right, which is ultimately the only force capable of saving the United States and therefore capable of saving Western civilization from our various enemies. So I'm very, very concerned about the health of the right, about the viability of the right to lead the United States into the 21st century and to stand for biblical truth, for the Jewish-Christian ecumenical alliance that the West necessarily was founded on, depends upon, right, and on and on and on. Look, so one thing that Charlie was passionate about, he firmly, adamantly believed that after the war in Gaza was over, then you would see the polling start to return to a historically more normal place when it comes to U.S.'s relations, when it comes to views on the Jewish people in general. I'm not entirely sure exactly that that's happened yet, or if it's going to happen over the next few months or the next year, but it's certainly something that I am very much keeping a close tab on. Another thing that I think is important is that we need more advocates of Israel's importance to the United States to speak the language of MAGA, to speak in the language of nationalist, realist foreign policy. I have a whole chapter, Nissim, in my book making this case fairly explicitly about this alliance on avowedly MAGA, America First, realist grounds. To be clear, there's a lot of content as well about the importance of the biblical inheritance and morality. That's all in there too. But we have to speak the language of the moment as well, which means we have to speak about the transactional nationalist realist case, which there is a really, 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 really strong one. By the way, that's actually Donald Trump's entire foreign policy when it comes to the U.S.'s relationship is grounded in that astute assessment of the realist case for U.S.-Israel ties. So that's part of it as well. And I guess I'll end with this because it's probably a fitting place to end, which is I think the number one thing that Jews can best do to become liked or admired even in the eyes of our Christian friends and allies is to be better Jews, to actually do the mitzvot, to actually rap tefillin, to actually daven, to keep kosher, to actually live a Torah observant halachic lifestyle. The amount of conversations that I had with Charlie and other Christian friends, Nissim, saying that, why is Israel the capital of the gay parade in Tel Aviv, the rainbow flags there? Right. No, I think a lot of our Christian friends want the holy people to be holy in the Holy Land. Right. And they want their holy people friends in the U.S. to act holy as well. They don't want to see them post on Twitter on Shabbat, for instance, right? I mean, they don't want to see them, eating lobster and shrimp. They want to see them eating a kosher hamburger or whatever. I mean, that really is the number one thing, I think, that is not just best for neshama. It's not just best for your own individual soul, your own individual salvation, your own individual connection with Hashem Barach, but I think it's the best thing that you can do as well when it comes to trying to make a positive image for Judaism and Jewishness in the United States and by extension Western civilization.
Josh, you are amazing. There's just no other words to say. You are amazing. I'm so happy that we were able to connect. And next time in person, either here or in Florida, wherever we end up at. But I can't wait to connect with you and talk with you more. I have 1,000 more questions, but we'll leave it there for the night so you can do your other things. I really appreciate you, brother. Really appreciate you.
God bless you, Nissim. Thank you so much.
God bless you. Thank you so much for watching. Please, again, make sure you like, subscribe, notification bell, and if you can, make sure that you pick up some merch. NissimBlack.store. Make sure you get yourself a cup, t-shirt, something, help and support this channel. Also, you can sign up for Glory Nation, which is my online community where we go deep into prayer and how to protect ourselves from being idiots. See you guys in the next video.